everyone, let's welcome Aaron Reynolds to Dragon Talk. Yay!
Hey guys. Thanks for having me.
The studio
Thanks
audience
for
goes
being
wild
here.
for you. Amazing.
You actually legitimately did have a studio audience because Quinn was in here, I will say.
That's true.
A minute ago, professing his very shy love of your books.
Yeah,
of one in particular. And yes, and his love of farting.
Yeah.
I mean, you really know your audience, Mr. Aaron Reynolds.
Well, I figured, okay, if I could write a D&D for the next, a D&D book for the next generation, for 5th, 6th, 7th graders now, farts is an easy inroad. I didn't want to write a book about farts, but when my editor and I started talking about what about a D&D book that also had potty humor in it, I was like, oh yeah, I'm there. I'm there for that.
I was actually, that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you about like how you pitched this book to an editor or an agent or whoever. Like, I want to write a book about D&D and farts, or I want to write about a book about D&D, and then the farts came later. Like, what? And were they totally on board with this idea, or did you have to sell them on it?
It was kind of actually a weird process and a little unusual of a process because my editor at Macmillan, Connie, she's fantastic and highly collaborative. And so unlike many of my projects where I bring a story to them or I pitch it to them, she was like, let's have a brainstorm meeting. Let's talk about what our next book together is going to be. So I loved that. And so she was saying, I'll just tell you a few things that our teams have been talking about, and you can tell me ideas that you've got cooking. And they had been talking about like a new potty humor book. Like, wouldn't you love to be in those corporate meetings? Like, we need a new potty humor book, right? But they wanted to do like a Captain Underpants for the next generation or something. I mean, they were like, there hasn't been a really good potty humor book in a while. And I was like, okay, I mean, I like a poop joke. I'm down for a fart joke. But I wasn't sure I was excited to do a full blown book about farts and poops and da. So I was like, all right, tucked away. Let's see what else we got. And as we talked, I think it was that meeting that I discovered that Connie plays D&D. And I mean,
that's why she was collaborative.
Yes, exactly. As so many great moments happen when you discover that the person you're talking to plays D&D, it all clicks together. So I of course played D&D from way back, and we started geeking out about D&D. My agent is sitting in this meeting going, "What are you guys talking about? You guys are so weird." And she was like, "I would love to do like an epic fantasy, old school D&D style adventure book." And I'm like, "Okay, what if we took your original idea of potty humor and we took it and we combined it with the epic old school fantasy humor book, and we could call it, I don't know," and then we both said it at the exact same time.
No way.
Farquest.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Wow.
It was right there. Yeah. And it was right there. It was, we were both really on
synergy.
That's
what that's called, marketing buzzword for you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. Well, shout out to Connie for making this happen.
No kidding.
Yeah, no
Good
doubt.
job, Connie.
That's right. It says at the beginning of the book, I said there at the, this quest would have never started without you, because that's true. She is to the silent but deadly Connie Sue, the wisdom of a monk, the strength of a warrior, the intelligence of a mage. This quest would have never started without you.
Oh, that's really sweet. And it does say right on the cover, a silent but deadly adventure.
That's right.
There is a lot of the poop and fart references, which I appreciate because I love a good pun, and I also am a big fan of farts and poop. So,
which is unusual in a mom, I mean, I tell the parents when librarians or the parents come up to me and they're like, "Fart book, really?" I'm like, just give it a chance. Just read it. Because I didn't want to write just a farty, poopy book. I wanted to write a story with heart. And my feeling is that this story does, and the series does, have a ton of heart and ton of
heart and farts,
personal growth. I say, but
they rhyme.
Just give it a chance, because behind the heart, there's a whole lot. Behind the fart, there's a whole lot of heart.
Yeah. Oh,
Is that a tagline that you use too?
Yeah, it's true.
I don't know if I honestly, I don't remember how Farquest came to me. I don't remember if it was recommended or I discovered it, or I don't remember the how, but all I know is that I was so excited to get it and tore open the box and read it to Quinn that night. And it was like 4 words in, Quinn goes, "Mom, I think this is a D&D book." And I'm like, well, it's like, it feels like D&D. It's fantasy, of course. Like, it definitely has D&D essence. And then maybe 4 more words, he goes, "Mom, I think this guy is a D&D player." And then, so I just like flipped to the back of the book to read your bio. And right in your bio, it says, "As a longtime dungeon master and lover of Dungeons and Dragons, Aaron is no stranger to epic quests." I'm like, good thinking there, Quinn. Good perception check.
Yeah.
Or insight. So
Exactly.
So then that just made us love the book even more. But
Yes.
it really does feel it's like a love letter to D&D. There's even a character named Master Elmore. Is that
Of
a
course,
nod
that's
to
a nod to Larry Elmore. Yes,
Aw.
yes. They're nods to. All right, so I should preface this by saying my love of D&D goes way back. I mean,
Show and tell here.
These are not only books
Whoa.
from back in the day. These
Oh
are
my God.
my books from back in the day. These
Wow.
are my 5th grade D&D books. Back when
Oh my God.
I got this monster manual, the Christmas, I'll never forget it, the Christmas of '81. The Christmas after the summer that I discovered Dungeons and Dragons. And so my love goes way back of D&D. And so for those that have high perception checks, that you will see little, very subtle nods to things like Elmore, Larry Elmore, and little nods to the Caves of Chaos, and little nods to Tomb of Horrors, and some of the old classic stuff that I grew up on that literally changed my life and made it okay for me to have a big imagination, which up to that point I thought was just this thing that got me into trouble a lot.
I remember those days, as well as fart jokes, I'm sure.
Yeah.
With a healthy smattering of those. Tell us a little bit about the characters in Farquest, because I think that's always the best part of any epic quest, is like the people who go on this adventure, and hopefully some parents out there listening, or your kids listening, can identify with some of those characters.
Yeah, I wanted it, like you said, it's a love letter to D&D, but I wanted it to be accessible to kids that wouldn't know D&D, or even more so accessible for parents who love D&D, and looking for an easy road to get their kids in. So it has 3 main characters, and for those, I think this is on video too, right? So I can show things, and that's okay. If you're listening to podcasts, then sorry, I'm showing the book cover right now.
You can describe it with your Dungeon Master voice.
It's you enter a dungeon and you see before you 3 amazing characters. One is Fart. His real name is Bartok, but nobody calls him Bartok. He dreams one day of being Bartok the Brilliant, but nobody calls him Bartok. His nickname is Fart. And how he gets that nickname, you'll have to read the book to find out. But it has to do with a very special day called his spell picking day. And the very first spell that he chose to pick, when he could have had so many other more amazing ones, he chose one that was funny and goofy instead. So he
was it Gust of Wind? It must have been.
It wasn't. It was Gas Attack.
Oh.
It was Gas Attack, yes, which allowed him to basically do a gaseous form spell and turn his enemy into a gas cloud, a fart. And he didn't pick it because it was powerful. He picked it because it was funny. And his Master Elmore, his mage teacher, did not approve, and so began calling him Fart from that day forward. So Fart is a misfit at their school, the Krakatop Academy for Heroes. He is the one chubby mage apprentice when all the rest are skinny and serious. He's goofy when all the rest are, very left brain and serious minded. And so he's a bit of a misfit there. And his master's always trying to serious him up, and it doesn't work. So he feels a bit of fish out of water in this role as a mage apprentice. Then he has a friend named Pan Silver Snow, who is an elven monk. And in my world, her monk powers take a lot of inspiration from like Avatar: The Last Airbender. She has the ability to manipulate the elements. So she can control fire and control, not make them, but control and manipulate air and water and earth. And so that is a very fun, I found that was a twist on the monk powers that gave me a whole new, very visceral way to approach her skill set. That wasn't magic per se, but that was this cool elemental connection. Yeah. And then he has another friend. It was very important to me that there be strong, amazing, powerful girl characters in this, and not just the girl character as the sidekick to the two boys, but dominant, powerful, assertive, and really heroic girl characters who are much more the heroes and the protagonists in so many ways of the story than Fart himself, even though he gets his name in the credits, but in the title. But then there's his other friend, Moxie Battleborn, and she is a dwarven warrior. She is powerful with her mighty hammer. She is powerful with her enormous shield, but her most powerful skill of all is her immense knowledge of all things related to monsters that she gets from this book, this huge book that she carries with her everywhere called Buzzlock's Big Book of Beasts, which is basically her own personal monster manual. And so anytime they come in contact, it was a great way to not only make her be a brainy warrior in a way, but also give me an on-road to introduce kids who might not be as familiar with fantasy tropes, to give her a vehicle to explain what some of these monsters are and what so you'll see all throughout the illustrations there, she's constantly popping her book open to identify some of the beasts that come out. And there's these little excerpts from
that's great.
Buzzlock's Big Book of Beasts that kind of give these very brief but very cool descriptions of some of the creatures that they come in contact with, so that kids who don't know what an owlbear is don't feel left out in the dust. They quickly catch on to the world. So
that's such a great mechanic to use in novel writing, where it's like, oh, you need someone who can teach the other characters, but they're really teaching the audience, and it works really well. I also like how you just kind of upset all of the tropes involved with YA fiction, but also D&D. Having a brainy warrior, a dwarf woman, girl do it as well. I love all of that. Yeah,
it's super fun, and it gave me a really diverse set of characters. Early on in the book, I won't spoil too much, but early on in the book, they when they leave school, their last year of schooling at Krakentop Academy for Heroes is basically an internship. They go out and do what's called hero wilderness training, where is their masters go with them, and the three of them plus their three masters go out to take on quests and do heroic deeds. And very early in their hero wilderness training, their masters get obliterated in a goblin attack gone horribly wrong. And they have to decide, do we go back to school or do we try this hero thing on our own? Is it possible that experience is the best teacher? And so they go forward, and they're all very different from each other. So that creates lots of possible conflict, but also creates lots of possibilities for personal growth and teamwork and creative problem solving and all kinds of stuff like that, which they have to do.
Those middle grades too, it's all about finding new boundaries, right? Like, I think, I don't know, I don't want to relate everything back to my own experience, but my daughters right now are biking on their own in the neighborhood.
Whoa.
And I'm a little
so
bit,
1980s. I love it.
It is very 80s, yes.
Yeah. They've got friends and stuff.
vibe going
on.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh man, this sounds like what a great learning tool to be like, look, you can go out on your own. There's danger, but you have to know about that danger and how to avoid it, and that's really important. And it's one of those kind of, passive things that you learn by playing D&D as a kid. Yep. Was that true when you jumped into it in the summer of 1981? Was that the kind of the appeal?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was. So like in your daughter's situation, they're out and they, something goofy happens. One of them falls off their bike, or one of them, hits a squirrel or what. how quick are they going to be to run back and tell dad, or to solve this for themselves? At that age, they're not going to want to run it back and tell dad. They're going to want to solve it. So that was a lot of appeal. That I had been a little bit into fantasy in 5th grade, but I remember very clearly, I was over at my best friend Andy Cook's house the very beginning of the summer of 81. And we were just gotten on summer break. We were sitting at his house playing Atari. And his brother, his 7th grade, 8th grade brother came in and said, "Hey, dorks, I have a game. I need more players. Come on." And we're like, okay, because, when you're a 5th grader, you do what the 8th grader says. And we went in there, and I was expecting like Monopoly or something. And he sits us down, and we make these characters, and he starts leading us through this dungeon that I later discovered was the Keep on the Borderlands, the Caves of Chaos. And I had never experienced anything like this before. It was absolutely mind-opening to me. Here was a game that we were inventing the story as we went. Like, I had never heard of such a thing existing, and it was fantastical and exciting, and you could die. Like there was monsters, and it was heroic but goofy and funny. And I remember our first encounter with a monster. He told us, you walk in and you see 12 kobolds, and I'm like, oh, what's a kobold? I had no idea, but it was just amazing to me. And I think really discovering that game was an absolutely instrumental moment in my own creative development life. I don't think I would have become an author if it wasn't for D&D. That game unlocked a thing in me that said, you have stories to tell, and there are stories in you, and you have ideas that are worthy and worth getting out there. And that big imagination that you have, which all your teachers say, would you quit being such a spaz? Would you settle down? Would you quit fidgeting? Would you, that big imagination has a lot of bonuses and good points to it as well. And I hadn't realized that at that point. I really thought my imagination was just this thing that got me into trouble a lot. So
That's amazing.
It was critical, eye-opening, and D&D was, I think, just formative, creative boot camp for my young life that led me down the creative path in life.
That's great. Yeah, it feels like there's like a, all kids play pretend, right? And make up stories and play with dolls and stuffed animals and other, and army guys and things like that, right?
Sure.
But what D&D does is it takes that and it makes it codified, right? So it's not just, you and your friends goofing around. Oh, I want my idea to be the one. Oh, no, my idea is the thing that's going to, it's the Dungeon Master's idea, and you can add things to it, but there is like a framework. And I think that is such a freeing jumping off point for so many of the creative folks that we talk to on this podcast, because you're right. Everybody has that pretending experience, but nobody has the experience of taking that pretend and putting it down on paper. Like, taking the notes in the right way, or even just making marks on your character sheet. And that's the experience that is a writer, right? Like where you're like, I have these ideas and I'm talking about them, but making them palatable for an audience, even if the audience is just the 3 or 4 people around the table, that is writing, right? That is something that you don't get to do with any other game or pastime out there. And that was so formative for so many people. It's amazing.
Yeah, I agree. DMing in particular, I didn't come into DMing until maybe 9th grade was, and it really came out of nobody knows how to DM. Well, I played, and all I do is read these books in my free time. I could quote scripture and verse to you on them. So yeah, I'll DM. And
Gygax 317.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah. PHP, baby. And it was exactly right what you said. This idea of I'm creating a world, but it has to be understandable through my audience. It can't just exist in my brain. They have to be able to process it, assimilate it, make sense of it, respond to it, have an emotional response to it. DMing was all that, which is what writing is.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So going back to that day at Andy Cook's house,
Yeah.
so what was the character creation process like? You actually rolled up a character from scratch at that moment?
I
Right
did.
there?
I rolled up the character, my very first D&D character. I still have the character sheet somewhere
Oh,
in
wow.
this mess. It was Gryden the Rebel. He was my human warrior, or not warrior back then, fighter.
Yeah.
He was my human fighter, and we rolled the dice and rolled up our abilities, and he just gave us some gold pieces and took us shopping at the keep, and we bought. So I'm like, you're giving me money and I can buy swords with it? What? I mean, it was just amazing. And very quickly we were in a dungeon. I remember that first session. We were in a dungeon. I didn't have a clue what I was doing, but it was yeah. We just rolled up characters right then and there, and I think even now, as I DM, I've DM'd ever since ninth grade. I DM a group now every Monday night we play, and I had to take a break. After you get to college and okay, you still have time to play a little bit and your friends, but then you hit your 20s. I don't know if this was your experience, guys, but life happens and you're trying to build a career and you're trying to though you guys like your job is D&D. What? Why did my high school guidance counselor not tell me I could go work at TSR?
It's an actual job.
What? I had no idea in high school. Oh, and so life gets away from you and you don't have as much time for your hobbies and things like that. So there was this hiatus of about 20 years, but a few years ago, I started to get back into, 5th edition. I'm like, wow, people are playing D&D again. This is amazing. And it's not like impossible to find people to play. Like everybody plays. And like girls play. Like what? I mean, it was amazing. We couldn't find it. We would have given anything to have a girl sitting at our table. And to have, now I play on Monday nights and 4 out of my 5 players are these incredible women. Man, you wouldn't be able to slap my 5th grade self and tell him that this would be the future. He wouldn't believe it. So I when I was discovering the 5th edition rules, even then I found, again, it's this beautiful game that you get to modify and adjust as fits your table. And I found several things that I found myself comparing, of course, as you're going to do, to the last time I DM'd, which was 1st edition, and going, I think this is better. In my group, we're gonna play this rule 1st edition, but these things, I love these skills, and we're gonna do those 5th edition. And so you get this wonderful, homebrew, which people are doing all over, which is this thing that works great for your table and your DMing style and makes the game as exciting as possible for the player sitting in front of you. And that's the goal ultimately.
Yeah. I think going back a little to what you were talking about, both you and Greg, about how that unlocking the imagination with D&D, and one of the things that I love also about D&D is that it does, in addition to sparking that imagination, it also gives players and fans a lot of avenues to explore outside of just rolling dice, which we all love to do anyway. But like there's the books that are associated with it, or maybe it's you want to just write. Maybe you just want to create your own worlds and create your own characters and write backstories for them and never touch the tabletop. Or maybe it goes off to the comic books and you want to inspire a love for writing and reading and that, or just a love of reading. Like all of that is just so just powerful that from that one moment when you start your very first campaign, which is one of the things that I love about Farquest is that is one of the avenues that I find kids, especially my own son who's been exposed to D&D from a very young age, totally gravitated to it. And he's a struggling reader. I don't want him to hear that. And what I have found, and that a lot of parents and teachers with reluctant readers, is it's not so much that they don't know the words. It's the material before them is not that interesting. And what we have discovered is that Farquest, a book that I would normally, before bed, lay down next to him and read to him, he grabs out of my hands and he's like, I want to read it. And he does. And that's amazing to me because just as D&D at Andy Cook's house opened your imagination and your love for all of these reading and writing, your book has essentially done that for my own kid. And he's now like, this morning we were reading Dog Man. That's another favorite because there's a lot of poop humor in there too.
Yeah.
Cracked up this morning reading the word diarrhea together. But
which is such a great vocabulary word.
And it's a hard book.
It's so hard to spell, and it's such a great vocabulary word.
I told him, I'm like, I still can't spell diarrhea. Can never have gotten that word right.
$5 word. Are you kidding me?
And I will say, big sense of pride when he looked at it and knew it. He read it himself, but he's not like, because he got so excited by the fact that he could read Farquest. And he was like, that's a big book. Like, this is a hardcover book. And there's not pictures on every page, and I can read it. He's now, he's picking up more books and actually challenging himself in that regard. So
that's so great.
So thank you for that.
Well, I am thrilled to hear that. You're hitting all my hot buttons right now, which is I don't feel that he probably is a struggling reader. I think it has everything to do. Reading and passion are tied together innately. And there are, and I'm going to just ask forgiveness for anyone who's listening who is in this camp, but I'm going to also ask them to open their minds a little bit and say there's a lot of well-meaning grown-ups, teachers, parents, educators across the gambit who have this idea in their head of what good reading looks like.
Yeah.
And most kids start out loving books.
Right.
I don't know many young kids, kindergarten or first grade, who is like, no, I hate books. Books are terrible. Most kids love books. But then something happens where the book they're excited about, this book that has diarrhea in it, this book that has farts in it, some well-meaning grown-up tells them, now go get a real book from the library. Go get a book that basically saying that book you like, that book in your hand that you're excited about, that doesn't count. That's not a real book. So go get a real book. And what you basically told that kid is, oh, well, this adult in my life, this teacher, this parent, this whoever, says the books I like aren't real books.
Right.
So I guess I don't like books.
Yep.
And
my interests aren't real interests.
No, they don't count. And
it kills me when that happens early too. It's like, you're telling them that first grade, kindergarten, they're going to hold on to that. Like that's the only experience they have with books. And then that's, and I've seen that in my own life where people are like, they're reading graphic novels or things like that. And
yes.
A friend be like, well, we allow them to do that reluctantly. And I'm like, what do you shut up?
And they're excusing,
don't even
they're
say
making
that
excuses.
out loud.
I know. They're like making excuses like, well, we think it's okay because it gets them to read at least. I'm like, don't apologize for letting your kids read a graphic novel. Graphic novels, I will have you know, are, you can read all the studies, have a much higher level of vocabulary than chapter books written for the same age level.
Yeah.
They simulate reading muscles and critical thinking muscles that are much better than just words on the page.
Agreed.
It's so adults, be the one in your kid's life, whether you're a teacher, you're a parent, be the one in your kid's life who sees what they read and puts the next one like that in their hands and says, I validate what you're reading. I'm thrilled that you love this book. Here's another one just like it, because what you will do is you'll create a kid who loves books and who loves reading.
And if you have a kid who they don't like reading, but they love Minecraft, then give them Minecraft book.
Yes.
There is a book out there that will interest any kid. You will find something. And I will highly recommend Farquest as well, because who doesn't love farts?
Follow the passion. When I was begging my parents for this monster manual the Christmas of my 5th grade year. It's because I was excited about the game. I wanted to have these books. I spent all my time sitting around reading those books.
Those books are full of $5 words. Like,
they are.
I learned my
Amazing.
vocabulary.
Manticore? Are you joking me right now? Hippogriff?
Euphonious.
But no one had to talk to me. No one had to tell me, well, I guess you have an interest in nonfiction, don't you? No, I don't know. I love these monsters and I want to read everything there is to know about them. So sorry, you get me worked up with that topic. I'm very passionate about.
We're passionate about that too. So
yeah, it's huge. Graphic novels count, people. D&D
absolutely
books count.
Comic books
farts
count.
And comics and diarrhea and all that stuff counts. And you know,
and the funny thing is, I'm still going to go on this for a second because I have another personal example where my daughter was reading the graphic novels for around Wings of Fire, which is a popular dragon series right now, and she read the graphic novels before the actual novels, and we were like, yeah, these are great. Why not go ahead and do it? And she was studiously reading them, and then she heard about the other versions from her friends, and they're like, oh, there's a little bit more details in those. You might want to check those out too. So she's reading those now too, and so there is a natural progression from, even if you believe the thing that they're not real books, there is a progression from that to getting more detail because they want it, because that will happen anyway. And my daughter's the one who's always sitting, perhaps a little bit to the detriment, being like sitting reading while people are, hanging out or doing things like that. And peers will be like, well, how did you get your daughter to love reading so much? And we're like, we let her read what she wanted.
Yes.
And that's the answer. It's not about this.
That's it.
Weird, you must do what we want and read, Dick Meets Jane at the Hill books that are out there. Like, have them read the stuff that they're passionate about, like D&D books. And that's why I think young adult stuff like what you're writing, as well as the Young Adventurer series for Dungeons & Dragons that gets into some of like I love that it's just the idea of D&D manuals that you loved as a kid that are written with a younger reader in mind, right? Have you seen those from Jim Zub and Stacey King?
I have, yeah. They're glorious. You're absolutely right. It's our goal isn't to raise up kids that read only Hemingway. Our goal is to raise up kids that love reading, and you get a kid to love reading, and the rest takes care of itself. They do better in math. They do better in spelling. They do better across the board if they just love books.
Especially with D&D players, because they're learning those arithmetic skills. They're learning so many other soft skills involved as well.
It's so funny. My agent that I mentioned earlier, who was sitting in that meeting going, what are you guys talking about? We hooked her and she's now part of my D&D campaign.
No
She's
way.
First time player. And we tease her mercilessly because the rest of us have all played D&D at one point or another in our lives. And so when she rolls, she's like, why do I need like a PhD in algebra to figure out how many hit points of damage I do? And the rest of us are just like right there. We know how to calculate rolls on the fly. Nothing against her. She's a brilliant agent, but she doesn't have that experience of rolling dice and adding up those numbers quickly in your head, plus bonuses, plus this, plus I got proficiency, plus boom, gives me this number. That's I'm
not there yet.
That's a life skill.
Are you one of those people that rolls your rolls to hit and your damage at the same time?
I'm not.
Oh, that was so impressive when I would see people like you're that confident you're gonna hit that you're just gonna roll that damage dice along with it, and they're just like, but bam, 18 points of damage. I'm like, how do you know that?
No, I like combat that moves, but I also like the humiliation of defeat if they don't get a good roll. I don't want them to think, oh, they got those good points. I want to have a second to. Yeah. The time that they rolled damage, I could have humiliated them for a moment. So
that's the kind of dungeon master you are.
No,
humiliate your players.
I'm not. But that flavor stuff. I mean, if you roll a 2, you are going to slip and almost kill yourself on your sword. It's just going to happen. That's not. I didn't invent these rules. That's just, that's just the way it is. That's called flavor, people.
Yeah, definitely.
So what's the storyline for this campaign that you're running currently on Monday nights?
We're a little whole world. We're kind of I like a campaign that's got a little bit of everything. Like I love the usability of 5e campaign books. Like back in my day, back in first edition, it was you would get a standalone adventure. That was a module. And then if they level 1 to level 2 through that, then you do a whole nother adventure. I love the usability of like Salt Marsh or one of the big books where you're basically in this world from level 1 to level 12. Like that is so accessible for a new DM, I think, to be like, where do I start? How do I take my players through a world? What does that look like? Here's your whole campaign right in a book. It's amazing. I like a little more flavor variants. I don't necessarily want to do a whole campaign level 1 to 12 around undead or vampires or things like that. So I like stealing bits and pieces, which I find suits me best. So Ghosts of Saltmarsh, I'm using actually a piece of that, the adventure we're running right now. They are traveling from this mountainside keep they've met this witch that is sending them on this adventure to this long abandoned, centuries old abandoned elven school of magic, but it's like halfway across the world. And so we talk about, I'm very collaborative with my players. So we talked about it and said, if you had a choice, would you travel in real time to that far off place and have lots of cool adventures along the way and explore and gain a level or two on the way so that you might be really ready for whatever's waiting in those depths? Or B, would you stumble upon a griffin or a portal that would take you there very quickly? Asking for a friend, I'm just wondering. So
Here, fill out this survey.
Fill out the survey. Because I realize I can decide, and then they could all hate my decision. I want everyone to have fun. Yeah. So they, like me, think the journey is the destination. So they were all in for that. So I've got pieces of my own homebrewed world mixed with this sea adventure that's coming from Ghosts of Saltmarsh, that's combined with this old school dungeon crawl that was in the pages of Dragon magazine in the March of 1985 issue.
Oh my God.
Which sits on my shelf right now. So I love doing that, bringing in some of this old esoteric stuff out of Dragon magazine back from the 80s, or, leading them through pieces of Keep on the Borderlands or some of this old stuff because nobody knows it now. So it's pretty easy to 5e it and throw it at the characters and have fun with it. So
nice. Well, that sounds like a super fun. I love that there's this collaboration too of like, what do you guys want to do? I had something like that similar where I was running Waterdeep Dragon Heist because I love the city intrigue. Yeah. And there's a lot of new players and they were like, are we going to go into a dungeon ever? And I was like, oh, well, that's not really what this is. Thing. So I eventually was like, let me just scrap that and we'll just go into let's bash undead and explore a wide open continent type of thing. So yeah, you just got to listen. Yeah. And I think that's a really important skill for Dungeon Masters to figure out, right?
Yeah. I mean, and I'm pretty transparent about it. I mean, I do a lot of, I let them know up front, I'm big on communication. So I want to know, like after about every 2 levels, I kind of initiate a little dialogue over email with them and say, tell me 3 things that you would love to see more of that I've thrown at you. Tell me 2 things that you hated and never want to see again. Because I want to cater adventure. I can have fun no matter what. So I want to cater adventures I want to follow the passion. I want to cater adventures to me. That's my life mantra. Follow the passion and you can't go wrong.
Follow your bliss, man.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it.
You're a good dungeon master.
So
do you know, I'm sure you know this, but if our D&D players pick up a copy of Farquest, the illustrations might be a little familiar. Do you know our Cam Kendall connection?
I know, yes, I do. I know that he does illustrations for Monster Mayhem cards. Yes,
he did the Monster Madness expansion for Dungeon Mayhem.
Yeah. Yes, that's right, Dungeon Mayhem.
I love him. That was another thing that I was. You know what? That may have been how I heard about Farquest. Now that's coming to me. I think because I follow him on Twitter, and I think he may have shared something about Farquest.
Okay,
that might have been it.
Yeah. Oh, he was such a find. We agonized over who to illustrate this, and I don't have all the say. It's usually the publisher that makes the decision, but again, Connie is incredibly collaborative, and she wanted me to be thrilled with whoever we landed with, and we looked at so much art, but his stuff is so quirky and so funny.
So good.
And you see it on the page and this guy gets it. He gets fantasy, he gets game playing, but he gets humor, and that's the critical thing. Is some of his illustrations take the humor, because at its heart, it's an epic fantasy adventure, but it's an epic fantasy comedy. Let's be honest. And some of the things he puts into the illustrations that take the joke so much further are so funny. He's is a dream to get him for this book. Yeah.
Yeah. He's great to work with. We love him.
Yep.
I'm seeing the connection now, like with the way the covers are. I'm like, oh yeah, that does.
Yeah.
It's like the
Familiar.
Dungeon Mayhem,
Yeah.
Monster Mayhem.
Even down to when it was time to do our bio art, and most novels don't have bio art, but he said, I'm going to do bio images for us. Tell me what class and what race you want for your bio. So I'm like, Dwarven Ranger, obviously. So he did me as a Dwarven Ranger, and then he did himself as a gnome bard. And it's just it's just so funny. He's just so funny, and some of his brilliance in terms of, if I can find a page here just to show everyone the brilliance of, because he doesn't just illustrate the book, with spot illustrations. He creates these spreads that are absolutely like whole page. Gosh, can I find the one I'm looking for?
Almost making it like a graphic novel in that way.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, like this one here is, here's the page.
Yeah.
So they're in this dungeon. They come across this tunnel with this snake sculpture that's mounted over it, that they have to decide if they're going to walk through. And so he doesn't just draw a little thing. I mean, early on, he was very about, I want to encompass the entire spread. I want to play with the page turns. I want to be able to mess around with this kind of these kind of art scenes, as well as these smaller, little spot illustrations. And so it's just, it's such an experience just to read it, because those page turns are just magical.
And that's the thing that really lights up the imagination for younger kids too, because they can, they're not as well equipped as adults are to be like, what does a snake statue look like? But then having that just one key moment, they can imagine the rest of it around them. And that is a skill that, the type of writing that D&D stuff has, as well as the graphic novels that people jump into at that age, really does ramp it up there. All right, I want to ask you a question, because I see here you have your favorite monster is an Umber Hulk.
Yeah.
Why is your Umber Hulk your favorite monster?
He was one of those monsters back in the day that you never encountered. Nobody ever puts an Umber Hulk in the dungeon.
Umber Hulk.
Yeah, him and the Beholder obviously is the classic, and the Bullet. And I remember just spending hours pouring through the monster manual. The
Landshark.
Yes, Landshark. Yeah. And I remember he's like, Bullet, what are you talking about?
I know. I was like, wait,
everybody says it differently. Everybody.
Yes.
I like to say boulet.
Boulet, yes,
Boulet.
the French Elvish inflection. And so I remember looking at this old picture back in the monster manual and being like, I want to run into one of those. And you never did. You never had one of those come through the wall. And and you never got like the coolest, like the magic item you would read, like the portable hole I'm like, why aren't these things ever in real Dungeons and Dragons? I never had a dungeon master who wanted to give us that stuff. So yeah.
Do you give that to your players now?
Yeah, it was like if you had a dungeon master like you and who said, what 3 things do you want more of? You could have been like Umber Hulk,
Rust
Monster.
Yes. Are you kidding? I played D&D for 30 years and never encountered a Rust Monster.
Do you ever put them in your game?
Oh, it was in the dungeon just like a month ago. Yeah, we had a Rust Monster that destroyed the cleric's armor. Yes, are you kidding me? Yes.
That's
great. the most dangerous monster out there, because it's like, my stuff is gone.
Yes. It was great.
That magic sword I had for.
I hope you find your Umber Hulk one day.
Someday.
One day, I hope so.
My white widow.
I wanted to ask you about your elementary school visits, because I'm guessing that's a really fun part of your job. But
it is.
What are the hands-on presentations you do?
I do. So I like to be interactive. So I think, often a lot of authors do school visits where you go into elementary schools. You get invited to talk to the kids and, do a PowerPoint or whatever. But I like to keep it pretty interactive. So I'll incorporate a lot of audience participation, a lot of sound effects.
Like fart noises?
Well, I haven't done that yet, but
I eat a bean casserole before each one of my presentations.
You do have to gauge it with your interactivity. At what point can you just never come back from it? right? And when you unleash the farts, that's just at that point. You may never recover.
You'll clear a room.
Yeah, we're done. We're done now. Okay, you can only pull that out at the very end. Yeah, because we're done now. Teachers, they're yours. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. You're
My
welcome.
work here is done.
Yes. So I remember back when I had a mystery graphic novel called Joey Fly Private Eye, and I wanted to explain to them what a mystery was. So I came up with these 5 things that are part of every mystery. The 5 things started with the letters and the word mystery. So MYSTER. And then I didn't want to just tell them about the items. So we actually I put up a ticking clock on the screen, and we had 30 minutes to solve a mystery, find the 5 objects somewhere hidden in the room, and unpack them before the 30-minute time frame ran out or whatever. So I'm bringing up kids out of the audience. I'm reading them a riddle about, the hidden location. They're having to deduce it, to solve it. They're running all over the room. The kids are watching them run, and they find the object or they don't, and then they bring it back, and then with it is an explanation about that thing that's found in a mystery, but also a clue to the next thing. Uh-huh. And so it's basically this, turning what could be just a PowerPoint of staying there talking to them while showing them pictures into this interactive scavenger hunt we're having a blast, but we're learning a whole bunch of cool stuff and hopefully getting inspired along the way. So
Dungeon Mastery.
Right? Yes, wow. It is. You're right.
It is. I love it.
How fun would that be for Farquest now?
I know.
I know. I haven't been since Farquest came out. It's all been on Zoom, but this fall, baby, I'm back in schools. Right? It's all coming together.
Yes. Here's all the items that you will encounter in Farquest.
Yes, exactly.
And they can be smelled. They can be, tactile.
Scratch and sniff.
Yes.
And speaking of which, you, in addition to creating Theater of the Mind D&D, you also create 3D terrain and use minis a lot. Is that true?
I'm a mixed bag on minis at the table. I like them for markers, but I also really love Theater of the Mind. So I'm not one that builds full blown, like, here's your entire dungeon and dungeon tiles. I have mad respect for those DMs that do that, but I'm like, where do you find the time to run a game like that and build dungeon tiles and build all these, every little detail? So on the board, back when we were playing at a table, we will use miniatures and terrain pieces as kind of markers, just placement markers to help us visualize what's going on. But I lean heavily into Theater of the Mind. Having said that, I love miniatures and I love dioramas and I love fantasy and science fiction things. And so, yeah, I'm pretty addicted as a side hobby to creating dioramas and painting them and doing a lot of fantasy themed, and I'll do science fiction and steampunk. And I think I've got one. Yeah, let me grab one real quick just to show you a little bit of the kind of thing I do. So this is one.
Whoa.
Wait, whoa.
Wait, what?
All right, so
yeah, so we were thinking it was going to be pretty lo-fi based on what you were saying.
I was thinking like shoebox.
No, this is
foil.
So this is a dio that I did, and I do a lot of scratch building, which is just building. Like, I don't use model kits per se. Like, all of this was just made from junk or I 3D printed some of the stuff, and like the mini there, I 3D printed her and painted her. But like the ladder, I made that from scratch from a bunch of assorted bits and bobs. And
oh my God.
I know. For those of you not watching this live on YouTube, it is just like a clockwork steampunk laboratory.
It's like a clock tower, and she's in there repairing it. And you can't even see the detail, but the detail of these minis that sculptors are doing for 3D printing now is incredible. She's literally holding her wrench, and she's flashing a peace sign up top, and the fingers are like millimeter. I mean, they're so tiny. And the stuff that you can print on a 3D printer now, it's on a resin printer. It's absolutely unbelievable.
I think it's very funny that you're like, well,
yes, please.
I just think it's funny. You're like, where do you find the time to do these complex things? And you whip that out, and you're like, I did this from scratch.
That took me a year. If I had to produce that every week for a game, I would blow my brains out. So this is, I wanted to do Scooby-Doo, as
Oh my
like
God.
a zombie hunters.
Oh
And
my
so-
God.
It's got
Yeah.
lights.
Lights up. Oh,
All right, so it's the mystery machine with
mystery-
The
zombies
mystery
coming at
machine
them.
all racked with the mystery gang up top, and they're all decked out with guns and swords and chainsaws and stuff. And there's a billboard behind them, and then in the foreground there's all these glowing green zombies, very Scooby-Doo-esque, kind of coming
Zoinks.
for them. Yeah, Jinky Scoob.
so this is something. Is this a scratch build? I've seen a lot of people do a take on the Scooby-Doo characters
Yeah.
as zombie hunters or post-apocalyptic. But
Right.
did you? What about the
This-
rest of it?
This is most, I would say 75% scratch built. So the mystery machine is like a van model kit that I customized.
Oh my God.
The minis of the Scooby Gang are put out by a really great company called Bombshell Miniatures. They do these little quirky customizations on pop culture figures. So they had a Scooby group that was kind of decked out. The figures are all pulled from the game Zombicide. So I pulled those out of the game and painted those. And then everything else is built from scratch.
Wow. That
You
is
really do have like
super
a
cool.
scene painter's kind of aesthetic, right? Like it feels like you could be a set designer in another life.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if I had to do that, then it might not be as fun. I don't know. I love doing it. It's really, really fun. And just a great way to connect that love of fantasy, that love of sci-fi into teeny tiny geeky things.
Yeah. Yeah. Things become less fun when they become your job.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. I mean,
Except
I'm thrilled
for
I get to
D&D.
write and
Except
writing
writing.
books.
Except
Yeah.
writing and except
Yeah.
D&D.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll talk offline of whether that's true.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I have one final question, but Shelley, did you have anything else you wanted to throw out there?
I mean, just keep the Farquest coming. That's it.
Thank you. Farquest 3 comes out this fall. As you know, Farquest 1 is out. Farquest 2 is the Barth of the Bedazzler, where Pan and Fart and Moxie go on an adventure to find a rare and mysterious creature known as the Bedazzler, and recover a valuable artifact from it. It's Barf. And the Bedazzler, let's see if I can find a good picture of it here. The Bedazzler is a giant floating orb-shaped eyeball creature with several stalks that have gems growing out of its head. Similar to another D&D creature that you might run into, except without the copyright infringement.
So it's got the gems on it, huh?
Why?
Yeah.
It's totally different.
I picture the Bedazzler to be wearing like a jean jacket that has lots of rhinestones on the back.
Yes.
That's what I think of when I think of Bedazzler.
So his gems are very bedazzly. And then this fall, Farquest 3 comes out. The Dragon's Dookie.
Oh my God.
Yep. We got Dookie on deck, people.
We got
So
Farts, Barf, and Dookie.
So they got to go and retrieve a powerful magic item from a pile of dragon poop. And then Farquest 4 comes out next spring, and it is called The Troll's Toe Cheese.
Oh my! Oh man!
You're welcome.
Hitting
Wow.
all of the bases.
Yep. And then some.
Running out of
love
gross
it.
bodily functions. I know. We gotta. If we go to book 8, 9, 10, then I'm gonna be all out of gross bodily functions.
No, you won't.
Yeah,
I feel
we'll
like
find them. Yeah,
I feel like Quinn could help you brainstorm.
Yeah,
some.
yeah.
Some earwax monsters, perhaps.
Boogers. I mean, boogers are how gross are boogers?
Oh, boogers, yeah. Eye
Gelatinous
boogers,
cube
right, for the
coming out of your
Bedazzler.
nose.
See, we got tons of ideas. So we're a Potty Award-winning podcast.
Yeah, I
That's
see
what
that. Man, I know
we-
where to head. I know where to head when I need to brainstorm.
And we didn't tell you this, but you are this is our 300th episode.
Ooh.
So we thought very appropriate that as a Potty Award-winning podcast, we would have the author of Farquest.
Nice.
Like,
nice.
how great is that?
300. Nice.
300, baby.
Guys.
Thanks.
Congrats. That's awesome.
Did you ask your question, Greg?
Oh,
I feel like
no,
we got
yeah.
sidetracked.
I'm sorry. I did
No,
say I
don't
was
be.
for book 3 and 4.
We want you to.
Yeah, we'll do this. What your favorite spell here? We have it as Featherfall, so I want to know about that. But then also, where can people find out about everything coming up, Aaron Reynolds? In addition to Farquest, all the stuff where they can follow you on social media, that stuff.
Yeah, they can go to my website. It's Aaron-Reynolds. It's a hyphen, Aaron-Reynolds.com. They can follow me on all the socials and there are links to all my books, and they can read about all the gross, body functions that are plagued my own life, and whatever. It's all there.
In addition to falling, I guess, which is why Featherfall must be your favorite spell.
Yeah, I just think it's so. It's such. I like creative spells that give you a lot of range for creative use. Like my favorite level 1 spell combo right now is Grease, because you can throw. Like I was in a group where the wizard, where I was casting Grease, and then one of the other casters, the ranger, he would always have fiery arrows at the ready, and so we called it the flaming pig, where we would we'd just say flaming pig, and then I'd use my action to cover the monsters with grease, or to put a pool of grease in front of the charging minotaur, and then he'd ready a flaming arrow, and just so Featherfall, I think, is one of those spells that just have so much creative combat potential if you really think about it. So I think that's why it's one of my favorite spells.
I agree. It sounds like Grease is one of your favorite spells too.
It is pretty fun. Yeah. It's got so much possibility.
The game that I'm running, we've used the magic user has Grease, and he's like, "How do you use this?" I was like, "Well, I don't know. Try it out." And then the first time we did it, I think a player died. I think Shelley's husband Bart was caught in the grease fire, and the cleric didn't save him in time. And then
it was much more heroic when he told
about
it to
that.
you, Shelley. Yeah.
Like, I went down in a flame.
Not what he said.
But then I think we used it to very great effect with killing tons of undead. Because they trapped them in a house and then set Grease with a thrown-in torch, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is great.
It's
and now
flammable.
It's like his go-to.
It's slippery.
Yeah.
It's gross. It's gooey. There's so many possibilities.
Yeah.
For Grease.
And that's one of those ones that's not written as doing fire damage when you light it on fire in 5th edition, but my holdover brain is like, yeah, of course it would do fire damage.
If it's grease, then if it was non-flammable slippery substance, then that would be different. But it's grease. Yeah. Grease burns.
Mm-hmm.
That's a true thing.
Yes.
True.
Awesome. Well, man, I'm really struggling not to end on a fart joke.
Blow it up, Greg.
Don't fight it. Let it out.
Let your creative wind blow. Just follow.
Don't hold it in.
I just cast grease on my pants, so we should end this interview right now.
The one who denied it supplied it.
Thanks so much for coming on, Aaron, and teaching the youth about farting, as well as these amazing characters that are going on this fart quest together.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, you guys.
It's Fart with Heart.
Our pleasure.